Welcome to MF Garza Law Firm, helping injured victims, one Texan at a time.
Hello and welcome to MF Garza Law Firm, helping injured victims, one Texan at a time, with Miguel F. Garza, founder of the MF Garza Law Firm. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, and today we are going to discuss claim versus court, why civil litigation might be your best bet. Miguel, welcome back. It's great to see you.
Great to see you too, man. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. So to begin, can you explain the key differences between filing a claim and pursuing a full civil litigation?
Sure. So it's kind of a broad question, but I'll try to nail it down here. Basically, when you have a claim, you're pursuing a claim through the insurance company. So really, you're at the mercy of the insurance company. You got to call, get a claim number, talk to an adjuster, give them your statement, things of that nature, while they conduct their own investigation. And you basically do whatever treatment, whatever is necessary, whatever your doctor suggests. If you have a property damage claim, have them assess your vehicle, things like that. But, a lawsuit tends to be way more effective or civil litigation, because you get access to more information. Like I said, in the claims process, you're just basically at the mercy of the insurance company. Whatever they're willing to offer you is all you can get. If you file a lawsuit, then you can kind of hold their feet to the fire, so to speak. And when you hire a lawyer like myself, if we file a lawsuit, I can start issuing legal subpoenas, such for like phone records, employee file, company files, things like that. And I can also get court orders. For example, if the at-fault party doesn't want to give me something I'm entitled to, I'll file a motion to compel or something along those lines, and we'll go in front of a judge and then have them explain to the judge, why they're not producing this information. And typically, they don't always have a good reason unless it has something very sensitive in there. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, you can get way more information through a lawsuit as opposed to the claims process. And then, of course, you get to have your day in court, get to tell your story to a judge and jury. And, depending on where you're at in the state, definitely have a good audience to really see what your peers and your members of your community are willing to help you out and compensate you for, because we all have family and friends in the community. And that's one of the great things about a trial, is you get to tell your peers about this and let's see what a jury says, as opposed to just dealing with what an insurance adjuster says.
When do you decide, like I know obviously it's up to the client what they want to do, but at some point you might suggest litigation over a settlement. What pushes you to that point where you're going to recommend that as a general rule? Obviously, every case is different, but when do you go, we may need to litigate?
Good question. And, for the most part, it's kind of on a case by case basis. If it's just a standard kind of rear ender where there's not a lot of property damage, may not be worth filing a lawsuit and having to go through the trouble and, incur all these legal expenses. But if it's a significant case with, very big injuries and very big damages, then you want to be able to prove up your case as best as possible. So, for example, if we're in the claims process and the insurance company doesn't make us a good offer, or something that my client's willing to accept, or something I feel that is, my client just simply shouldn't take, I tell them, the risks and the pros and cons and the risk and benefits of a lawsuit versus not filing a lawsuit. And if they're lowballing you, which insurance companies always do, then filing a lawsuit is the best way to go, in my opinion, because you can get access to more information, and we can get you better compensated, and at the end of the case. And then, obviously, like I said, we can find out more information throughout the case. And really, the other factor to that is how your injuries develop, because even though you may not be injured, in the week or of the wreck, or even in the month after the wreck, some of these injuries start showing up months or even years after the wreck. Like herniated disc, failed disc as well, things along those nature that might require some type of surgical intervention.
Okay, when you're talking to your client about litigation, what factors do you kind of want to make sure they consider before deciding to go down the litigation path?
Well, definitely that they're going to have to be cross-examined. In a lawsuit, you have to do what's called a deposition. A deposition is sworn testimony that takes place outside the courtroom, but's admissible at trial. So basically, anything you say can be used against you.
Mhm.
And so some people may feel uncomfortable with that. They may feel it creates a lot of pressure and a lot of anxiety, and they may not want to go through that. But I try to usually tell these clients that, look, I've done hundreds of these depositions before. I'm going to prepare you for them. I'm going to basically advise you what to say, what not to say, and to watch out for certain questions because some might be confusing or misleading. And I'm going to be next to you the entire time. And if something is, awry or not, following the rules of procedure, then I'm going to stop your deposition. I'm going to make sure you don't give any more information. But
Mhm.
essentially, having to testify, also a big factor is some people that, if you have a big injury that's causing a lot of, lost income or damage to your earning capacity or just affecting your quality of life, you really want to be able to tell your story. And the best way to tell your story is through friends and family members. What can he no longer do? What does he have trouble doing now?
Yeah.
What does she have? What can she not do that she used to be able to do before the wreck? And obviously, a lot of people will go to bat for their friends and family, but it's sometimes an inconvenience to these people. So having to get people lined up to testify for you can be a little difficult. But usually, when it's a significant case, a lot of people will go and support their friends or family in that case. So that's one of the main factors. But also, these insurance companies, they can be aggressive as well. If you're trying to say that you have an injury that prevents you from being physically active, I've seen insurance companies hire private investigators that go and follow my clients around to basically see if they're doing these physical activities that they claim they can't do in a lawsuit, and basically try to get evidence of them lying and performing activities that they can actually do, but they're alleging they can't. So another thing like that, but that's in more extreme cases.
Right.
And I'd say, you know, um, another factor is that, some people don't want to go through all the medical care. They have their own lives, they got family, they don't want to spend 10, 20 days out of a couple of months doing physical therapy. It just may be too time consuming for them, and they have different priorities. So if someone's not really going to commit to the medical care and follow their doctor's orders, then that can negatively impact the case, and we obviously want to prevent that. So
Yeah.
so a lot of different factors that come into play there.
So now on the positive side, if a client might be hesitant to litigate, what are some of the biggest benefits of pursuing a lawsuit? When you think it's applicable, and how can it lead to a more favorable outcome?
Few different scenarios in that, but basically, let's just say it's the lawsuit is against a company. Company perhaps hired somebody that was not properly trained, perhaps didn't get proper sleep. Maybe driving under the influence or driving with a suspended license or without a license. So usually, you can't find out all that information just in the claims process because you have no authority to get that information necessarily. Now, in a lawsuit, I can find out all that information. So you can imagine in a claims process, if you don't know that this driver had a suspended license, wasn't properly trained, maybe was severely fatigued and just shouldn't be driving, you're not going to find that out from the insurance adjuster. You're going to find that out
Mhm.
through a lawsuit. When I go and take the deposition of that driver or that company representative and find out what they knew when they should have prevented that driver from actually going out on the road and driving in an unsafe way. So that definitely can be something that a lawsuit will help promote a bigger settlement, because once you start digging up the dirt on these companies, so to speak, they tend to not want their dirty laundry aired out in the public, so to
Sure.
speak, and they want to keep all that from being disclosed. And that's how you can find that out, through a lawsuit. And then we basically try to settle the case before trial. But if we're going to go to trial, we're going to expose this company. We're going to expose that this driver should have never been hired or he was improperly trained, but yet you let him or her go out on Texas roadways and drive in an unsafe manner. So
Mhm.
That's one thing. You're being able to tell the entire story, not just what this one individual did on this particular day, because it usually goes back months or years in terms of the experience that these drivers have, what they're required to have in terms of qualifications and training. So that's definitely one bigger deal that can help in a lawsuit. And again, one of the other biggest things is everybody is entitled to their their day in court, to a trial by jury. That's the Seventh Amendment. And again, having that option to ensure that justice is served and you're able to be properly compensated due to the wrongdoing of somebody else, then that's just one of the best things about the justice system that we have access to, and that every person should consider when trying to basically right or wrong.
Are there any misconceptions or myths that you encounter when you speak with potential clients or clients about the process of civil litigation?
Yes, there's a lot.
Oh boy.
There's a lot. I'll try to nail it down. With one of the main ones is that people don't want to pursue a lawsuit, or they have a negative impression of lawsuits. For one, because they believe it's going to increase insurance rates for Texans or for companies, and that's just simply not true. Lawsuits do not do that. It's just the fact that these companies are being put on blast, so to speak, or being exposed as far as, like I said, what they should or should not be doing. And that's a really big issue there. But lawsuits do not increase your rates. It's certainly a misconception that insurance companies and, some legislators have put out there to try to prevent people from having their Seventh Amendment right and having their day in court. Actually recently, some representatives from Allstate, Texas, at the United States Senate, and they were talking about a number of different things about why didn't Allstate pay out on certain claims. Just to give you perspective, Allstate in 2024 made $64 billion in revenue. Okay, that's 12% more than they made in the previous year. And, in particular, the CEO of Allstate made $26 million last year. So these insurance companies are raking in so much money and not paying out claims as they should. And it's really hurting people that are trying to file claims and basically try to be compensated and get the coverage that they were provided through their policy. But then these insurance companies are just racking in billions of dollars and not properly compensating a legitimate claim.
Yeah. It's one of those things we've talked. I think you and I talked about it in the past about insurance companies, and I've definitely talked about this with other people before. Is just like, they pretend to have your best interests in mind, but I mean, they're in it to make money. They want to keep that CEO getting $20 million paychecks every year.
Absolutely. And, there's been some very brave insurance adjusters that have come out and testified about some of the issues that their supervisors have told them to do when providing an offer, such as altering their factual findings, altering their reports, making their reports factually inaccurate, and just simply lowering an offer or an estimate. So, it's really, and you're not going to find that out through the claims process. You're only going to find that out through a lawsuit. But that's definitely one of the big issues that happened in a misconceptions with civil litigation.
Yeah, I've heard that they, the adjusters are incentivized to keep those payouts low. Like they're the lower they can get, the more they're incentivized with bonuses and things like that. Just what I've heard. I have never been never been confirmed. But that's something I've heard, which is
that's absolutely true. And these adjusters, they kind of have like best way to say is that they have like a bucket of money that they use to pay out for claims, and they're only given X amount of dollars per year, roughly, based on the claims that they kind of have in their queue or their docket. And so they go and they come up with basically a budget for all the claims for a particular adjuster. And if it's getting towards the end of the year and they've paid out more than they want, then they're going to make you a lower offer all day. And that happens more often than not. It's rarely do you see that an insurance company budgets more money to pay out more claims towards the end of the year.
So if you're going to get in an accident, do it earlier in the year, not later.
Unfortunately, that's some of these factors like that. It's a lot of cases try to get settled before the end of the year. And sometimes it makes it a little bit more difficult. And in those types of situations, you might have to consider filing a lawsuit.
And kind of piggybacking off that, obviously, if you do file a lawsuit, you have the potential to get more value in the long term rather than just settling early. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. Because the other thing is any Texan has 2 years from the date of the incident to file a lawsuit. That's what's called the statute of limitations. If you do not file a lawsuit or you do not settle your case before that 2-year deadline, then you're SOL. You can no longer pursue that claim. So if your injuries are lingering longer than 2 years, or you might need surgery in year 3 or 4, or something along those lines, then you have to file a lawsuit to preserve your right to pursue a claim. And that's where having a lawyer that's experienced in civil litigation comes in and can help develop a case. And while the client does whatever medical care is needed in that type of situation.
What are some of the strategic benefits of having an experienced litigator on your side throughout this process?
Number of things. Obviously, being familiar with the courtroom etiquette. Having to go tell your story to a judge and jury and not having the experience and being able to present your arguments in an understandable way to the average person is a very, very big factor. And, the last thing you also want to do is piss off a judge in front of a jury or just at any time. You definitely don't want that to happen. So just courtroom etiquette is one big important factor. And really just having somebody that's experienced in that particular field of the law. That's why we have all kinds of specialists that specialize in personal injury law, civil litigation, probate. It's like physicians, right? You have heart surgeons, you got brain surgeons, you have orthopedic surgeons, and you don't want a brain surgeon necessarily doing a heart surgery, right? You want to go with a specialist that has a lot of experience in that particular field that you need someone to pursue a claim for you.
I would.
Maybe, but yeah, in that type of situation, that's definitely something to consider, having somebody that's experienced. And really,
definitely,
and there's a lot of attorneys out there. Obviously, you see all these billboards, and obviously, I'm sure there's all kinds of advertisements in your social media algorithms. Just do your research, find out what kind of results the law firm or the lawyer has gotten in the past, and simply just Google them and find out what you can. And I think that's one of the best things that we can do, especially with access to the internet, is that we can find out almost anything about anybody nowadays. And it's kind of scary, but it's something that I really feel that, and obviously the main thing is that making sure you're comfortable with the attorney, right? You want to be able to, my biggest thing is that when I sign up a new client, I always want to meet them in person. Obviously with COVID and now living in this Zoom world that we're in can be a little bit more challenging to do that, but you want to get a feel for the person. You really can't do that unless you're really face to face.
I agree.
And just being able to do that and build a rapport and make sure that they really understand what you're going through is one of the biggest things I feel that a potential client should know about their attorney, because you're entering into a relationship. It might be rocky, it might be good, but you want to feel that out from the start and make sure it's good and build a rapport with your lawyer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to MF Garza Law Firm, helping injured victims one Texan at a time with Miguel F. Garza. To connect with Miguel and the team, head to mfgarzalaw.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We got lots more great information coming your way. Miguel, always great having you here. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.